things that are above those thresholds, but that people might be ignoring or not dealing with. So we're saying below regulatory concern radioactive material, or any radioactive material which is not below regulatory concern, but which is in fact not being regulated by the regulatory agency otherwise having jurisdiction over such material in the town. In other words, if we simply capture the below regulatory stuff and we rely on other people to deal with the above regulatory, but they don't, we're going to pick it up anyway. Okay? Whether naturally occurring or otherwise, because as I said, this is naturally occurring, it's normally not a problem when it's a mile below the earth. So the fact that it's naturally occurring shouldn't get anybody off the hook. In any case, relating to, arising in connection with, were produced by or incidental to the exploration for, the extraction or production of, or the processing, treatment, or transportation of natural gas, petroleum, or any related hydrocarbon. So in other words, you don't have to worry about, you might worry about it, but it's no part of what we're doing that your dentist's office isn't doing what he or she should do with the spent x-rays. That's all there, but we don't pick it up because it's not related to, arising in connection with, produced by, or incidental to this other thing. Okay? All right. Now, Vince, it's time to listen for you. B, natural gas or petroleum drilling fluids, natural gas or petroleum exploration, drilling, production, or processing wastes, natural gas or petroleum drilling treatment wastes, such as oils, frac fluids, produced water, brine, flowback, sediment, and any other liquid or semi-liquid material. You want to pick up everything, no matter what they call it. Any chemical, waste oil, waste emulsified oil, mud, or sediment that was used or produced in the drilling, development, transportation, processing, or refining of nat gas or petroleum. Soil contaminated in the drilling, transportation, processing, or refining of nat gas or petroleum. Drill cuts of natural gas or petroleum wells, or any other waste associated with the exploration, drilling, etc. This definition specifically intends to include some waste that may otherwise be classified as solid waste, which are not hazardous waste. That's the thing I told you about, but we can pick it up and get onto it. Pardon?
No.
This definition of natural gas extraction, exploration, and production waste does not include recognizable as well as non-recognizable food waste or waste generated by agricultural use, which we now say farm use instead of agricultural use. Okay. So we've specifically excluded from all of that food waste and waste generated by agriculture. All right. The next item is nat gas extraction, exploration. So Vince, did that pick up what you were worried about?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So the next item is nat gas extraction, exploration, and production waste disposal / storage facility. And again, we're going to use this as this will be one of the items that is within the definition of support activities. Any of the following: tanks of any construction, metal, fiberglass, concrete, etc., impoundments, pits, evaporation ponds, or other facilities in any case used for the storage or treatment of the waste we just defined, that are 1, being held for initial use, 2, have been used and are being held for subsequent reuse or recycling, 3, are being held for treatment, or 4, are being held for storage. In other words, we don't want them to say this isn't a waste because it's not a waste, we're going to use it again, we're going to recycle it. Or it's not a waste because we're going to have it for treatment. And so forth. Do whatever you want, but don't bring that stuff into this town. Okay? Next item. And again, this also will be, this is one of this next concept of waste dump is nested within, as part of the definition when we get to that support activities. That's how we use it. Land upon which natural gas and petroleum extraction, exploration, or production waste, or their residue or constituents before or after treatment, are deposited, disposed, discharged, injected, placed, buried, or discarded without any intention of further use. Okay? Next item may be self-explanatory. It's also going to fit within the or be nested within the definition of the support activities, is a compression facility. Those facilities are a combination of facilities that move natural gas or petroleum from production fields or natural gas processing facilities in pipelines or into storage. The term shall include equipment for liquid separation, natural gas dehydration, and tanks for the storage of waste liquids and hydrocarbon liquids. You got to pick up with these guys at each stage everything they're doing, because if you simply say waste, they're going to say it's not waste. I'm going to recycle it or I'm going to sell it. So that's why these are relatively, I think, hopefully very comprehensive. Next item, natural gas processing facility. Those facilities that separate and recover nat gas liquids and or other non-methane gases and liquids from a stream of produced natural gas, using equipment for any of the following: cleaning or stripping gas, cooking and cooking the gas, that doesn't mean cooking at your house. Cooking and dehydration, residual refinement, treating or removing oil or condensate, removing water, separating natural gas liquids, removing sulfur or carbon dioxide, fractionation, don't ask me what that is, that's a Helmut term, of nat gas liquids, or the capture of CO2 separated from natural gas streams.
And just so we don't approve something we don't understand, would you ask Helen to let us know what that means, please?
Non-regulated pipelines. What we're doing with this basically, as we said, we can't touch FERC-related or state-regulated, non-regulated pipelines, or the pipelines that we make. Those pipelines that are exempt or otherwise excluded from regulation under federal and state laws regarding pipeline construction standards or reporting requirements. This term specifically includes production lines and gathering lines. Pipeline. All parts of those physical facilities through which petroleum, gas, hazardous liquids, or chemicals move in transportation, including pipes, valves, and other equipments and accessories attached to pipes, and other equipment such as drip stations, vent stations, picking facilities, valve boxes, transfer pump stations, measuring and regulating equipment, yard and station piping, cathodic protection equipment, whether or not laid in public or private easement or private right-of-way within the town. This includes, without limitation, gathering lines, production lines, and transmission lines. Radioactive material. Material in any form that emits radiation, but only if such material has been moved from its naturally occurring location through an industrial process. So if you've got radon coming up, you know, and you're dealing with it in your basement, this doesn't pick it up because that has not been removed from its naturally occurring location through an industrial process. Such material is radioactive material for purposes hereof, whether or not it is otherwise exempt from licensing and regulatory control pursuant to New York Department of Labor, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the Federal EPA, the Federal Department of Energy, the Federal Department of Transportation, or any other regulatory agency. So what we don't want to happen is for somebody to dump this radioactive stuff on some farmer's land, and for us to say you can't do it, and for them to say I can do it because the Department of Transportation or the Department of Energy only regulates radioactivity below X, Y, Z, however they measure that. We're saying none of that matters.
So the question, David, I'm sure is on a lot of people's minds, is this. How can we be, in a sense, holier than thou? You know what I mean? Like the feds say they can do it, the state says they can do it, and we say, nope.
The fact that the feds aren't regulating it does not mean that the feds say it's okay. In most of these, the EPA, we know, for example, hasn't looked at this stuff. That's why their study isn't going to be ready until 2013 at earliest. Despite what everybody else tells us about where this industry has been over time, this is an entirely new industry with respect to, otherwise they wouldn't be going through the S-guys, no matter what anybody says. It's not your grandfather's gas well. And the fact that right now somebody hasn't thought that we better regulate or prohibit or whatever, that, you know, it's as likely that they just haven't thought about it than they thought about it and said it was okay. Clearly, nobody knew or focused on the radioactive component of the Marcellus shale. They can find any of those rights with it, by definition. Now, if going forward, the EPA says, okay, they do their study, and they looked at this and they said, you know what? We think that this risk is non-existent. They could say that. They could say it's manageable. Well, then we can, you know, then we decide whether their definition of manageable is what this town agrees with. And if it's not, then we have to say, okay, are we preempted? But we don't have to get to that preemption issue until those first two questions are answered. But the mere fact that it's not regulated right now does not mean that somebody has said it's okay. Okay? Radiation, the spontaneous emission of particles, alpha, beta neutrons, or photons, gamma, from the nucleus of unstable atoms as a result of radioactive decay. Now, I can't explain this if you want me to, and I can diagram this one. Okay. One thing I know. Subsurface. No, that's it. Subsurface. Below the surface of the earth or of a body of water, as the context may require. Again, this seems like kind of a weird defined term to have, but we don't want to have any question on these programs. Transmission line, a pipeline that transports oil, gas, or water to end users as a public utility, and which is subject to regulation either by either FERC or the state. Underground injection, we touched on this before. Subsurface emplacement of nat gas or petroleum extraction, exploration, or production waste by or into an injection well. And lastly, as a defined term, underground natural gas storage. This is subsurface storage included in depleted gas or oil reservoirs and salt caverns of natural gas that has been transferred from its original location for the primary purpose of load balancing the production of natural gas. This includes compression and dehydration facilities and pipelines. So what they do on the load balancing is they basically, they store it. I mean, it's like any other commodity, but you know, they can't put it in a building like you can extra bricks or something, so they put it underground. And we're saying not in our town. If this stays in. Okay.
So there's no further comments from the committee on these definitions? We're all comfortable with these guys?
Except that I owe you, before you bless those,
Right.
I have to tell you what a couple terms mean.
Right.
Sub-terms mean. So we're not blessing those yet. Okay, now we're amending 9.1. 9.1 is on page 18 of the existing code. Is a planned development district. And this is called different things, different places. You guys call it a PDD, some people call it but basically it's sort of a special sort of wide open district where you can do a whole bunch of things as long as you comply with these requirements. This I think I know I talked about last week. This is just lawyering, but we should talk about it. Right now it says, so again, the way in your case the PDD works is it's sort of, it's a lot more open potentially than a regular district, because you're basically saying whatever's legal in our town is potentially legal in this district, as long as you comply with the other requirements here. But what yours says is any use or combination of uses otherwise permitted by this ordinance. And the problem there is simply that special use permits are permitted by this ordinance, but you could read this to say that that particular use could be allowed even if it didn't get a special use permit, which again, I don't think could possibly have been what they intended. So instead, we've changed that sentence, we deleted that first sentence only, and we've added the following sentence. Subject to the next sentence, which is already there, any use or combination of uses permitted as of right under this law and or allowed by special permit, but in that latter case, only upon issuance of the special permit. So we're not saying anything different here than what had to be interpreted, which is you can do it if it's as of right, and if it's a special use permit issue, you can do it if you have a special use permit. What we're trying to capture here is not letting, we don't want anyone to take the position that they read this to say that you can use a special permit use here without getting a special permit.
So we're basically doing away with all of section 9.1.
No, just the first sentence.
Sorry,
Just
just
the
the
first
first sentence,
sentence.
right, sorry. Just the first sentence.
And then replacing it.
With this, correct. And replacing that with subject to the next sentence, any use or combination of uses
Yeah.
permitted as of right, blah, blah, blah.
Okay. Article 10, now we're in the manufacturing industrial district that we defined before. And essentially, what's allowed in the manufacturing industrial district is certain articulated uses, potentially at least, but only, they're basically special permit uses. So we got a special permit to do two of these. I thought, in my draft, I took out. And that's what 2.6 does on page 11. And that is petroleum processing and storage, and chemical processing and storage, which I thought and still think are changes that are consistent with the narrow scope of what we're doing, which is just focusing on this industry. But that's why I did that.
Okay, so we're going to take out Article 10A, 11, and 12, petroleum processing and
Yeah,
storage.
we're actually not taking them out, we're gonna delete the text,
We're gonna
the same intention on that.
Intentionally omitted, you're going to delete this text and then put in intentionally omitted.
So just make it straight. 11 will be intentionally, how are you going to do this? 11 intentionally omitted, and 12 will be
So
said.
that you don't have to go through and change
Yeah, you don't have to
numbers and
read.
everything.
Yeah.
Right.
We get it, okay.
Okay. And again, you don't have to do it that way, you could do it or you not. Okay, we don't touch 11, Article 11. 12 deals with two things. It deals with site plan review and issuance of special permits. I should tell you that's unusual. Most of these treat those things differently. And in fact, most of this, the entire guts of this, this starts, I'm sorry, page 20 of the existing code. So the title is Site Plan Review, Approval of Special Permits. But okay, so let's just skip that. The special permit section is on section 12.2. There's a reference in here to a comprehensive plan on page 22, so I'm going to have to change that. That's an existing, and that's going to come up also in the draft, but even at the time we didn't have one yet. So I'll deal with that in the next draft. So what section 2.7 on page 11 of the draft does is essentially rebuild. Let me see which it rebuilds.
12, 2.
Yes, 12, sorry.
Page 20.
Yeah, page 11, section 2.7 of our amendment references section 12.2 of the existing code. And it deletes clause E in its entirety, which purports to be the standard for the special permit. And it puts in what are more traditional steps for getting a special permit. And I'll read those out loud. Should I read those out loud?
Yeah, go ahead.
Section 12.2 of the existing zoning law is hereby amended so as to delete the text of clause either of in its entirety, beginning with the phrase all special uses necessarily, and replace the same with the following text. Said replacement text to be inserted immediately following the text of clause E of 12.2 and immediately preceding clause F of section 12.2. Number 1. All special permit uses shall require site plan review. Special permit uses are uses for which approval of the planning board is required and for which conformance to additional standards is required, in addition to all requirements of this law. All such uses are hereby declared to possess characteristics of such unique and special forms that each specific case or use shall be considered an individual case that requires consideration of the merits and details of each proposed use to assure that the proposed use is in harmony with this law, the town's comprehensive plan, which I'm going to change, and that such proposed use will not adversely affect the general character of the surrounding area if the conditions of the special use permit are met. That's basically the legal definition in the state of the special permit use anyway, but we spell it out because we should.
So it's going to say such proposed use is in harmony with this law, and that such proposed use will not, and you're just going to take out in the town.
No, I'm not sure what I'm going to do with comprehensive planning.
The zoning code.
Yeah, maybe, or, yeah, I've got to figure out what we want to do with that. But yes, it'll basically be what your existing framework is, however we define the existing framework.
This is it.
Okay. Well, except that the law says that a comprehensive plan is not simply a piece of paper where you have one. It's not simply a piece of paper that says comprehensive plan. It's that piece of paper as augmented by policies of the town board. So I got to see how that fits together. But the concept is, you know, we're going to pick up our land use framework with however we say that.
All right.
And that's what the law expects anyway. Number 2, in evaluating a request for a special use permit, the planning board shall require evidence of the satisfaction of each and every of the following standards by findings entered into the record. A, that the special use is specifically authorized by this law. So in other words, that flips us back to that first thing we talked about. It's got to, the particular use has to be specified somewhere within one of our district use tables as a potentially allowed special use permit. If it ain't there, you can't come and say, I want a special use for this. If it ain't there, you can't have a special use permit. And this will help the code enforcement officer almost like a checklist in that regard. B, that the special use meets all of the criteria set forth in the subsection of this law authorizing that special use, depending on what district we're talking about. C, that the granting of the special use permit will not alter the general character of the surrounding area or impair the intent or purpose of this law or of a land use framework. In so doing, the planning board should consider factors such as location and size of the proposed project, nature and intensity of the operations involved, the size of the site in relation to the size of the proposed project, the location of the site with respect to existing or future streets giving access to it, with particular reference to automotive and pedestrian safety and convenience, traffic flow and control, and access in case of fire or catastrophe. These are all things that typically people look at as a special use, the planning board looks at anyway.
They don't have
Whether the
insurance.
location, nature, and height of buildings, walls, and fences will discourage the appropriate development and use of adjacent lands and buildings and properties generally in the district, or impair the value thereof. Whether the operation in connection with the proposed project will be more objectionable in nature to nearby properties and properties generally in the district by reason of noise, fumes, vibration, flashing lights, increased traffic, or any other objectionable reasons, then it would be the operation of any use that was permitted as of right. Again, these are the very factors that cause particular uses to be considered to be special permit uses as opposed to as of right because of these factors. We're just spelling them out. The impact on existing and planned capacity of infrastructure systems, including but not limited to roads, water, sewer, energy, and drainage. Whether environmentally sensitive features will be protected. And lastly, whether any authorization hereunder, in other words, a grant of this permit, would create fiscal burdens upon the community at large. And lastly, no special permit shall be issued for use on a property where there is a violation of this law or other town law or regulation. This is something that, when you go to the next step and do your other zoning ordinance, nothing to do with what we're doing here, you want that in there for everything, every single kind of permit. That's very, you don't want somebody who's basically been thumbing their nose at you and are in violation of their property to, you know, if you want to apply for one of these, bring yourself current. A special use, thanks. A special use permit shall authorize only one particular special use and shall expire if the subject use shall cease for any reasons for 6 months or longer. 2.8, section 13.3. You guys okay with that?
Yes.
We're basically, we'll just say that's covering
You're
all.
getting rid of
Yes.
E,
Yep.
and that basically all those in the
Everything
substitution
from
for
1
E.
and 2 and 3.
Right.
Yep. Everybody's okay with that?
Yes.
Yes? Okay.
Okay, the next item is 2.8, page 12, and it references section 13.3. And what we're doing is intentionally deleting that section. What happened here, I think, anyway, what this has drafted, what this says is that anybody who violates, I don't know what this means, but what it says is anybody who violates any, I'm sorry, this is on page 23 of the existing code. Anybody who violates any provision of this local law, I think what they intended to say, it probably was anybody who violates Article 13. And then they go on to impose a fine requirement that's smaller or lesser than the regular fine penalties. So I think what happened is it's probably I don't know any way to say this except sloppy. It's probably sloppy drafting, and they either meant to limit it to 13, Article 13, or it's nonsensical, because then it said, then what it means is any person who violates this is basically $100. Then you get to Article 20, or whatever it is. Wherever it is, wherever the penalties are, and you know, which one is it that governs? Is it the real penalty provisions, or is it this thing that specifically says anybody who violates any provision? I mean, it can't be, like I said, it can't, oh, you look at 18, I said, you look at 1.2, either this has to go and be changed, or Article 8 or Section 18.2 doesn't mean anything. And so I changed.
You're saying delete it?
Yes.
So you're saying section 13.3 would be taken out, and then intentional bids would be put in.
Right. Okay. Everybody caught up with me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Next item of the draft is 2.9 on page 12, which is amendments to Article 14, which is supplemental regs and exceptions. Sorry, let me see. So what we did here is simply change this notion. The provisions of this ordinance should not be construed to basically limit or interfere with construction or operation for public utility purposes of the following. We deleted for public utility purposes, and we substituted the words by a public utility. So to the extent that you were intending, which I'm sure is what it was, to have this deal with activities by public utilities, there's no change. But this, by affecting the change we made, we eliminate the ability to, somebody to come in and say, oh, I was confused by that, it's ambiguous. I want to put a compressor station in, and that's for public utility purposes. Now you can't say that unless you are a public utility.
So you're taking out for public utility purposes in the second line and changing that to by public utility.
Correct.
So for operation by a public utility of water and gas.
Yep, yep.
Everybody is okay with that change?
Yes.
14.5, or B, as in boy, of 2.9, I talked about at the meeting. Right now, this language says that temporary buildings may be placed in any district for uses incidental to construction work. The intent, we assumed, was that it's got to be incidental to legal construction work, basically. And those temporary buildings themselves have to be legal. So you got two components. You can't put some kind of fire trap temporary building on a construction site, and that construction site is not even legal. You didn't pull a permit for it, et cetera, and say you're cool under 14.5. So we deleted 14.5 in its entirety and substituted the following, therefore. So long as a building permit, and if applicable, a certificate of occupancy is first obtained, temporary buildings may be placed for uses incidental to lawfully conducted construction work. And any such building shall be removed forthwith, change the word forthwith, upon the first to occur of completion or abandonment. So once again, I believe that this is what the draft person intended, but it just, because I don't think that he or she would have, if she had thought about it, would have wanted there to be illegal buildings as temporary buildings, or construction that was itself illegal. So as long as the construction is legal and this temporary building is up to code, yes, you can do it.
What are you going to do with forthwith?
I don't know yet. But you told me about it last time, I know.
Well, it's so ambiguous.
Right.
Forthwith to you, to me,
Isn't that
this
immediately?
guy, don't know. So we've got to work on
I'll clean it up.
Okay.
Okay, next item, 2.10 on the draft, bottom of page 12, is an amendment to section 17.5. I don't know what that is yet.
it. Non-conforming.
All right, so what this does is change, which I think what's typical here is to accept out certain things from, with respect to farm operations. It's usually the height things, which we've already covered with respect to silos. And the way this was drafted, notwithstanding any other provision, any farm building formerly conducted or used in any district hereafter classified may be reestablished, renewed, or restored. I honestly am not trying to be cute here. I don't know what that means. I think, but I read it to say that if you can show you bought an old farmhouse, a beautiful old farmhouse, it ain't a farm, there's no land behind it, but at this point, it's in the middle of town. But you can show that formerly, you had farm operations conducted thereon. You may reestablish, renew, or restore. I just don't know what that means. And we pick up the things we need for the farming or the exceptions for the height, which we've already picked up. So what I did with that was intentionally omitted.
Again, I would just say since this is not really connected with our main purpose here, that we revisit this once we do the comprehensive.
Does this have any impact?
It could.
Okay, could you explain that?
Maybe we'll look at it, see.
Here at the classified.
I don't know what it means.
Well, we're talking about non-conforming uses, right? So, no, let's think about it.
No. That's
Non-conforming uses or buildings. Okay, So no, I'm just thinking out loud here. So,
What is the district?
I suppose, what could have been non-conforming that we would allow now that has an impact on the hydrofracking?
The question, maybe not, the question is, what does it mean? Do you want to leave a position here that nobody at this table and subsequently nobody?
What is a district here actually classified as RA?
Rural agriculture. Residential agriculture.
Right.
Residential
Right.
agriculture.
Maybe reestablish, renewed, or restore.
To what?
To its original, whatever.
Yeah, it doesn't.
In other words, and even though it's non-conforming, see, but that exempts anything that having to do with the farm. You do not have to have it, it could have been discontinued for 25 years, according to what they're saying there. It could be more than 50% destroyed, and they're saying you can bring it back. I understand that. I still don't understand what impact it has on the hydrofracking. I know, I want to know.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Okay. How about if in that farm operation, the thing that's going to be reestablished happens to be a previously tapped up natural gas well as found on the Moose Farm in Mount Vision, for instance?
I mean, that's part of the problem. The title says farm uses, which is now defined, but it doesn't use farm uses. It says farm operation. So farm operation, Vince is absolutely right. That can be far broader than what we thought we were doing when we defined farm uses. Now we could say, and again, we don't. I acknowledge I don't know what any of that means on the, and that's why I want to take it out. But I'm not. You're the client. But maybe what we could do is say. Maybe the safe thing to say is any farm use, maybe reestablished, renewed, or restored.
And have we defined farm use?
Yes, yes. Because you've already got the stuff you were talking about on the restoration of non-conforming.
Right.
17.3.
Right.
But
So
this
why
is
don't we
saying
just-
that this is exempted from, is what it's saying. You see, all that they're talking about in, the discontinuance, et cetera, restoration, 50%, farm uses are exempt. That's what this is saying.
Okay, so you're saying what this meant to do was that in a regular use, a non-farm use, you did not have the right to restore a non-conforming use
If it
to the
had
extent
been
of
used for,
to the extent of casualty loss in excess of 50%.
or not used for a year prior.
Okay, or whatever, I only see the 50% part, or wherever that is.
Yeah, that's there.
So what you're saying is even if it burns to the ground, which is more than 50%, if it's a farm use, so why don't we just make this any farm buildings utilized in connection with a farm use? That deals with Vince's issue. What are you drinking, Vince? Oh, I thought it looked like a champagne bottle. Okay.
Once this is passed.
All right, so I will,
Okay, so
I
you're
know
gonna
what to do.
rework
I know
that?
what to do,
Okay.
yep. Okay. Okay, page 13, section 2.11 on the draft, referencing section 18.1 of the zoning code. This previously, and again, I think the intent, I assume the intent was to deal with what's always the case that I've seen, is what's accepted are basically height issues, which we picked up otherwise. This, and I intentionally omitted it, this would accept from the entire coverage of zoning in this town, any farm structure, which can't be what anybody intended. Because what they typically want to accept is height of silos. So that's what that does. Section 2.12.
So wait, we're saying just intentionally omit.
Yep.
All right.
Because we've already dealt with this before.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
The next thing we've got on page 13 of the draft, item 2.12 of the draft, referencing section 19.1 of the existing zoning law, is essentially to rebuild in a manner that's consistent with state law and decisional or case law, the respective standards that apply to, on one hand, area variances, and on the other, use variances. Should I read all this?
Yes. Please.
Okay.
There's a light at the end of the tunnel.
Section 19.1 of the existing zoning law is hereby amended so as to delete the text of clause B thereof in its entirety, and to replace the same with the following text, said replacement text to be inserted immediately following the text of present clause A of section 19.1 and immediately preceding present section 19.2 of the existing zoning law. B. The Board of Appeals shall have the power, upon an appeal from a decision or determination of the code enforcement officer or other administrative official or body charged with the enforcement of this law, after public notice and hearing, and in accordance with the requirements of law and this law, to grant area variances and use variances as those terms are defined herein.
It's zoning as opposed to code officer.
Okay?
Yeah.
We don't have a,
Yep, good. Thank you. Thank you. One, if a use variance is granted, the applicant shall obtain site plan review approval from the planning board prior to commencing the use and prior to obtaining a building permit. Two, no use variance shall be granted by the Board of Appeals without a showing by the applicant that otherwise applicable zoning regulations and restrictions have caused unnecessary hardship. And I have written down, what Jim and I talked about last time. One, unnecessary hardship. In order to prove such unnecessary hardship, the applicant is required to demonstrate to the Board of Appeals that, with respect to every permitted use under the zoning regulations for the particular district where the property is located, each of the following four criteria is satisfied. One, the applicant cannot realize a reasonable return on the entire parcel of property, and such lack of return is substantial as demonstrated by competent financial evidence. X, that the alleged hardship relating to the property in question is unique and does not apply to a substantial portion of the district or neighborhood involved. Y, that the requested use variance, if granted, will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. And Z, that the alleged hardship has not been self-created. The state sets those requirements.
I have a question, David, on this demonstrated by competent financial evidence. Again, being on the board, we often have people coming in and just saying, well, this is what it would cost, or that's not what I would get, and it's just word of mouth. I would strongly recommend that we have somewhere in there written.
Yeah, I thought I had it somewhere. But okay.
It's later on, but not
Yeah,
here.
no, I see
I
that.
would rather have it repeated than not there at all.
Yep, I got it.
And I don't know if people agree with me on so.
Well, I mean, yeah, competent financial evidence, that's, you know, I mean, in my opinion, it's kind of something that comes from the CPA or something.
Right, but they bring it as a witness, yeah.
And then from businesses.
Yeah, you don't want somebody to just come in and say, I think it's worth $100.
Right, no, you have to, but we should
So
define.
you wouldn't.
Yeah. Lowercase double I, reasonable rate of return. In evaluating whether the applicant can realize a reasonable rate of return, the Board of Appeals shall examine whether the entire, original, or expanded property holdings of the applicant are incapable of producing a reasonable right of return, and not just the site of the proposed project. No use variance shall be granted unless, in addition to satisfying all other applicable provisions of law and this law, the Board of Appeals finds that the applicant has clearly demonstrated by detailed dollar and cents proof the inability to obtain a reasonable return for the entire parcel and not just the site of the proposed project, and for each and every permitted use in the district, including those uses permitted by special use permit.
Again, I'd ask you to put written
Yep,
dollar and
got
cents
it.
proof.
Got it. Lowercase triple I in the whole. Unique hardship. No use variance shall be granted unless, in addition to satisfying all other applicable provisions of law and this law, the Board of Appeals finds that the entire parcel of which the project is a part possesses unique characteristics that distinguish it from other properties in the area. Lowercase iv in the whole. Essential character of the neighborhood. In making its determination of whether the proposed project will alter the essential character of the neighborhood, the Board of Appeals shall take into account factors that are of vital importance to the citizens of the town, including without limitation, A, the rural, residential, agricultural, and historic character of the town, B, its irreplaceable recreation and tourism sites, C, the extent of hazard to life, limb, or property that, or which, I'm not sure, may result from the proposed project. D, health impacts. E, the social and economic impacts of traffic congestion, noise, dust, odors, emissions, solid waste generation, and other nuisances. F, as in Frank, the impact on property values. And G, whether the applicant will use a style of development that will result in degradation to the air quality, water quality, or scenic and natural resources of the town. In order to find that the proposed project does not alter the essential character of the neighborhood, the Board of Appeals shall interpret the public interest in said essential character of the neighborhood to require, at a minimum, that the project will not do any of the following. Lowercase x in the whole. Pose a threat to the public safety, including public health, water quality, or air quality. Y, cause an extraordinary public expense, or Z, create a nuisance. Lowercase b in the whole. Self-created hardship. The Board of Appeals may find that the applicant suffers from a self-created hardship in the event that the board finds that X, the applicant's inability to obtain a reasonable return on the property as a whole, results from having paid too much, or from a poor investment decision. Y, the applicant previously divided the property and is left with only a portion which suffers from some unique condition for which relief is sought, and which did not apply to the parcel as a whole. Or Z, when the applicant purchased the property, he or she knew or should have known the property was subject to zoning restrictions. 3. In addition to the application requirements from time to time established pursuant to law and this law, an application for any use variance shall continue a typewritten narrative explaining what the application is for and how the project meets or exceeds all of the criteria for a use variance, including A, competent financial evidence. Competent financial evidence containing reasonable specification of the nature and factual particulars of such claim and articulating the basis for the applicant's claim, and including at a minimum as to the entire parcel of which the proposed project is a part, date of acquisition, purchase price, present value of the property, the amount of real estate taxes, the amount of mortgages or liens and other expenses, the asking price for the property when it had been offered for sale, the cost of demolishing any existing structures on the property, cost of erecting new buildings for each and every permitted use in the zoning district, including uses allowed by special permit, efforts to market the property, and a schedule of all other property in common ownership at either the date of the enactment of this law or thereafter. B, competent financial evidence must include dollars and cents proof, such as appraisals, economic studies, and any other evidence supporting the applicant's contention that the desired relief is appropriate, including appraisals relating to any alleged diminution of all or substantially all the fair market value of the property. For the purposes hereof, common ownership means all other interests in property either located within the town or contiguous to the town. Located within the town or contiguous to the town that is held by any of the applicants, if more than one. Whether such ownership is of a legal or equitable interest, in whole or in part, contiguous or not, and whether such property interest is held by any of the applicants through a legal or equitable interest in another corporation, partnership, trust, business entity, association, fund, joint venture, or individual. C, unique nature of the property. The applicant must provide evidence demonstrating the unique nature of the parcel as a whole. The fact that the improvements already existing at the time of the application are old, obsolete, outmoded, or in disrepair, or the fact that the property is then unimproved, shall not be deemed to make the plight of the property unique or to contribute thereto. Exceptional topography, thank you, topographic conditions are an example of a factor demonstrating the unique nature of the property. D, alteration of the essential character of the neighborhood. The applicant must demonstrate that the proposed project will not change the essential character of the neighborhood with regard to physical, economic, social, or environmental elements. Adverse impacts to the essential character of the neighborhood include, but are not limited to, decreased quality or increased quantity of stormwater runoff, increased soil erosion, increased traffic congestion, decreased road quality, impairment of the scenic or rural character of roads, increased noise, dust, odor, and/or glare, reduced wildlife habitat, decreased air quality, decreased water quality, impairment of the viewshed, creation of solid waste, negative impacts on sustainability efforts, increased social cost, increased emergency response times, negative impacts to public infrastructure, decreased property values, and negative impacts on the health of area residents. E, hardship not self-created. In order to show that the hardship is not self-created, the applicant must demonstrate that either one, when the property was purchased, the zoning regulations from which a use variance is now sought were not in existence or did not otherwise apply, or two, some other changes occurred during the applicant's purchase or since the applicant's purchase, which makes the use non-conforming, as long as that change was not caused by the applicant. 4, the Board of Appeals, in the granting of use variances, shall grant only the minimum variance that it shall deem necessary and adequate to allow an economically beneficial use of the property. And at the same time, preserve and protect the essential character of the neighborhood and the health, safety, and welfare of the community. 5.
David,
Yes.